Hey, what's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist and today doing a Numeron burn deck profile. So I'm really excited to do this one for you guys because this deck is actually suggested to me by one of my patrons, Izzy. And this deck is an extremely fun deck to play that can OTK your opponent or use burn traps to end the game. So without further ado, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell there so you can come part of notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below for all those awesome rewards. Like getting your name description in a single video, getting assigned cards in the mail, and even getting to request a deck profile every single month to your Patreon. And definitely give Izzy some love down in the comments down below for suggesting such an awesome deck. So let's get straight on into this one, guys. So first off, we're going to be playing 3 copies of the Fairy Dragon. Fairy Dragon is really good as a 3-of in this build, and it helps out a lot overall in this deck. This card has the ability that during your opponent's turn, when either player takes battle damage, you can special summon this card from the hand, then apply one of these effects to either gain life points equal to the battle damage or inflict damage to your opponent equal to the battle damage, which is a really interesting effect just to do more burn damage to your opponent to close out the game. We then play 3 copies of Lava Golem. Lava Golem is definitely a 3-of in the deck just to out 2 of your opponent's monsters and basically give your opponent a big boss monster that's going to do 1,000 points of burn damage to them every turn, which is amazing. This card is really good as a 3-of in the build because you really don't have a normal summon in the deck besides Planet Pathfinder, and it helps a lot overall in the deck. We then play 3 copies of Planet Pathfinder. Planet Pathfinder is definitely a 3-of as well, and the only other normal summon we play in the deck outside of Lava Golem, because this card is really good to be able to search out your copy of Numeron Network, because it's basically terraforming on legs, or in this case, on wheels. We then play 2 copies of Lord of the Heavenly Prison. Lord of the Heavenly Prison is in the deck to basically just protect your back row, and overall just a really good card to be able to reveal in your hand and protect your back row just in case you need to. So, that's it for the monsters, guys. Let's get in to the spells. So for the spells, we're going to start with a single copy of Chain Strike. Chain Strike is definitely a 1-of the deck, especially since this is a burn deck, and this card is amazing overall in the build because it has a really cool ability that you activate this card as a chain link 2 or higher, and you inflict 400 points of damage to your opponent times the number of chain links under this card. Also, you cannot activate this card if multiple cards or effects with the same name are in the same chain, which is a crazy powerful effect to use this card to do a bunch of burn damage to your opponent, but this card is currently at 1, which is why we're only able to play 1 copy. We then play a single copy of Terraforming. Terraforming is definitely a 1-of as well in the deck. Basically, just search out our copy of Numeron Network. We then play 3 copies of Numeron Network. Numeron Network is amazing in the deck to help us summon out all of our Numeron gates, because this card has the ability that during your main phase, you can send a Numeron normal spell card that meets its activation conditions from your deck to the graveyard, and this effect becomes that spell's effect when it would be activated, basically copying the effect of the spell card you're sending from your deck to the graveyard. And you only use the effect of this card once per turn, and also Numeron XZ monsters you control can activate their effects without detaching materials, which is a really cool ability. We then play 2 copies of Numeron Calling. Numeron Calling is a card you send to the graveyard off of Numeron Network, so we can basically summon out all of our Numeron gates to our side of the field. We're usually only doing this 1 time in the deck, but I like to play 2 copies just in case something happens to the first one, or just in case we need to go in for an OTK by summoning out all 4 of the gates again to our side of the field and going in for game. So, that's it for these spells, guys. Let's get in to the traps. For the traps, we're going to start off with 2 copies of Trap Trick. Trap Trick is definitely a 2-of in the build because this card basically copies any of our trap cards, which is amazing. You can banish a normal trap card from your deck, except another copy of Trap Trick, and if you do, set a card with the same name directly from your deck to your side of the field, which is an amazing ability to be able to use to instantly get the exact trap card you want on your side of the field. We then play 2 copies of Grave Trap Hole. Grave Trap Hole is really good because this card actually does 2,000 points of burn damage to your opponent, and also helps you stop hand traps because when your opponent activates a monster effect in their hand or graveyard, or when your opponent banishes monster effect is activated, you negate its effect, and if you inflict 2,000 points of damage to your opponent, which is a pretty cool effect. We then play 3 copies of Secret Barrel. Secret Barrel is amazing as a burn trap because this card actually has a really cool ability to basically just do 200 points of damage to your opponent for each card on their side of the field, which is an amazing effect to instantly do a lot of burn damage to your opponent and just a really good burn trap. We then play 3 copies of Secret Blast. Secret Blast is really good as a 3 of as well in the deck, because this card has a really cool ability to inflict 300 points of damage to your opponent for each card that they control, and if this card you control is destroyed by an opponent's card and sent to the graveyard, you inflict 1,000 points of damage to your opponent, so regardless of what they do, they're going to take some sort of burn damage from this card. We then play 3 copies of Ceasefire. Ceasefire is one of the original burn traps, and this card is still powerful to this day because this card has the ability, if a face-down defensive monster or an effect monster is on the field, change all face-down defensive monsters on the field to face-up defensive, but flip effects are not activated at this time. Also, inflict 500 points of damage to your opponent for each effect monster on the field, which is crazy when you think you can actually put 4 effect monsters on the field with a Numeron network, and then this card will just do 2,000 points of burn damage, unless your opponent has more monsters on the field, which then it's just going to do more burn damage. We then play 3 copies of Just Desserts. Just Desserts is amazing as a 3 of in the deck because this card inflicts 500 points of damage to your opponent for each monster they control. Again, one of the original burn traps and an amazing 3 of in the build. We then play 3 copies of Ring of Destruction. Ring of Destruction is one of my favorite cards that's a trap card because this card is such a cool original card from the game, but this card is a crazy power effect that during your opponent's turn, target a face-up monster that your opponent controls whose attack is less than or equal to their life points, destroy that face-up monster, and if you do, take damage equal to the original attack, then inflict damage to your opponent equal to the damage you took, but you can only activate one of this card per turn, but it's still one of the most powerful burn traps in the entire game, which is why we're playing this card as a 3-up, plus it outs a monster. We then play 3 copies of Magic Cylinder. Magic Cylinder is such an awesome card and so funny to win with this card, so I had to play this card as a 3 of in the deck. This card basically negates a monster's attack and then inflicts damage to your opponent equal to that monster's attack points, which is an insane effect. The only downside of this card is it does target, which is a little bit of a downside of this card, but this card is so funny to win with that I had to play this card instead of Dimension Wall, which is such an interesting card. So you can change this card out if you want to for Dimension Wall, but I really like this card instead because it's so funny to basically just use this card to basically OTK and just win the game because your opponent swings in, you go Magic Cylinder, and you won with Magic Cylinder. Plus I had the 3 original copies of the Labyrinth of Nightmare versions, which is why I actually chose to play this card over the other. So that's it for the main deck, guys. Let's get in to the extra deck. So for the extra deck, we're going to start off with a single copy of number C1, Numeron Chaos Gate. So this card is actually why I chose to build this deck, because it's such a crazy card to be able to use that actually does burn damage, which is why I play this card in the deck and why the Numeron version works so well, and how you actually bridge the burn deck into a Numeron deck. So this card is really cool, because you can also XZ summon this card using number 1 that you control as a material, and you transfer its materials to this card, and if this card is XZ summoned, banish all monsters on the field. And once per turn, during the next standby phase, after this card is banished, you can special summon this banished card. Then, if a Numeron network is on the field spell zone, inflict damage to your opponent equal to the combined attack of all banished XZ monsters, which is usually going to be about 3,000 that you're going to do to your opponent, because you're going to have 3 of your Numeron gates banished, and they each have 1,000. So it's basically just going to do 3,000 burn damage to your opponent, just closing out games. This card is amazing in the deck as a 1-up, but I really feel like you only need a single copy of it, because in playtesting, I only ever summoned it once to be able to go in for game in a single duel, which is insane that you just summon this card out to your side of the field and just basically burn your opponent for 3k. I summon it out just about every time I play this deck, but you only ever summon it once. We then play 2 copies of gate number 1, 2 copies of gate number 2, 2 copies of gate number 3, and 2 copies of gate number 4. So the reason you play these cards at 2 each is just in case you need to go into your Numeron gates. Again, these cards actually make it so this burn deck can actually go second, which is insane because you can OTK your opponent with the Numeron gates, which is crazy. These cards all share the exact same effect. They cannot be destroyed by battle, and at the end of the damage step, if this card battled an opponent's monster, detach a material from this card, double this card's attack, and all Numeron monsters that you control currently attack until the end of the turn. So basically attack for 1,000, then 2,000, then 4,000, then 8,000, and then if you need to, you can close out the game with your basically burn traps, which is really interesting. And this deck is super fun to be able to play Numeron as a burn deck, which is just insane because of C1. We then play a single copy of Zeus. Zeus is really good as a one-of, just in case we need to basically board wipe the field, then set all of our burn traps to our side of the field. Play a single copy of Typhon, just in case we go second. One copy of Megaclops. Megaclops is really good in decks. It's a 4,000 attack when monster. It's unaffected by other monsters' effects, except XZ monsters, and it cannot be destroyed by battle, except with an XZ monster, which is insane for your opponent to try and out this card. We then play a single copy of Yugioh. Yugioh is actually a card that I use summon from the X deck quite often when I'm playing testing this deck, because this card is really good to basically just help you draw 4 cards and then put 3 back, so you can dig in the deck for the exact burn traps you need, so you can set the exact 5 that you want on your side of the field, so that you can basically just burn your opponent for game, which is hilarious, because if you go first, you're usually just going to use Numeron Network and then summon out one of each of the gates, and then summon out Yugioh to basically just draw 4, and it's really good as a draw engine in the deck as well, so you can get to the exact cards that you need. We then play a single copy of Sorcerer of Sebek. Sorcerer of Sebek is really good because it helps you burn the opponent, which is really nice, which is why I play this card as a one-up. Then finally, a single copy of SP Little Knight. You don't have to play SP Little Knight if you don't want to. You can change it out for another copy of C1 if you need to, but I only found that I needed a single copy of C1, which is why I threw in the copy of SP Little Knight. You can also change it out for Avermax, which is another option for you guys. Mech Knight Crusadia Avermax is another option that you can make by using all 4 of the Numeron gates, which is really tough for your opponent to out, but it's really not super needed when you have cards like Megaclops in the deck. So you basically just want to make Megaclops instead of it, but you can change it out if you want to for a copy of C1 for an additional copy of it, just in case you want to do more burn damage to your opponent, just in case. So that's it for the deck, guys. I hope you enjoyed. This deck is super fun. If you guys have never played a Numeron burn deck before, which I bet you haven't, you should definitely give this deck a try. It's really wild, and I really like this deck overall, especially because you get to play Magic Cylinders, one of my favorite cards in the entire game, because it's so hilarious and such an awesome original card from the game. So that's going to do it for this one, guys. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell in there so you can become part of the notification squad, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.